25-year-old Jayland Walker was shot and killed by police. They shot him an estimated 90 times. So when is too much? Is it ever too much? This and more on today's Charlie Crimebuster. What some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome back to Charlie Crimebuster. Yeah, last week we were talking about the lack of response from the police in the Uvalde school shooting. Today we're talking about what many people are calling an over-response from police. That's in the Jayland Walker shooting. Well, first let me again say welcome. As I said last week, it is humbling to know that now there are thousands of downloads for our podcasts. Little did we know when we started this little podcast that we would see this kind of response. And we're truly thankful for you taking the time to join us on this journey. So from the East Coast to the West Coast and in other parts of the world, thank you today for joining us in this episode. Hey, let me encourage you to reach out with a shout out. We call it reach out with a shout out because you know what? We love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or even just want to disagree with us, well, every response will be welcome, and we're going to send you a special gift for taking the time to reach out. Even if you just want to reach out with a shout out and say hi, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. That's Charlie Crimebuster. That's all together, Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. Now, if you did not get that, we're going to place the address in our show notes. And you can find that on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, by the way, while you're there, don't forget to subscribe. That way you can have our latest podcast delivered weekly to you there. Now, some have asked how they can help us with our project. Well, I appreciate that question. You see, we do support our law enforcement, our first responders, and our military. We do that with our nonprofit organization called Peacemaker Network. You can be a part of that by going to peacemakernetwork.com, and there you can become a badge supporter, B-A-D-G-E, badge supporter. And for everybody that signs up as a supporter, well, this month we're going to give you a vacation voucher. That will save you hundreds of dollars for your next vacation trip. It's valued at over $500. And you can become a badge supporter for as little as $3 a month. You see, that helps us help others. Help where you can. That's peacemakernetwork.com. Again, we'll have that in the show notes. Now to our main focus. Jayland Walker was shot and killed by police on Monday, June the 27th. That was there in Akron, Ohio. Police shot and killed Walker following a pursuit and a foot chase that all started when Walker failed to stop when officers attempted to pull him over. That was at a traffic stop. And after several minutes, Walker's vehicle slowed. He exited the vehicle and he ran. Several police officers got out of the patrol cars. They chased him down. They deployed tasers in an attempt to stop him, but those attempts were unsuccessful. And just moments later, Walker stopped. He quickly turned toward the pursuing officers. Reporters were told that officers believed that Walker was reaching toward his waistband and was moving into a firing position. That is when officers opened fire, killing him. He was wounded over 60 times, according to reports, though a medical examiner did not say at that time how many of those were direct wounds and are exit wounds. There was about 8 seconds of gunfire, and it has been estimated that over 90 shots were fired, or around 90 shots. Now, hearing that, it is very understandable that lots of people are upset. In fact, July 4th celebrations were halted there in Akron, Ohio, as the city braced for impact. The mayor of the city, he declared a state of emergency canceled 4th of July city celebrations that were already planned. And there were protests and some violence and some arrests in the city. However, I must say to the credit of Walker's family, they continued to plead with people to avoid violence and to protest peacefully. Now, I'll be the first, even as a career law enforcement officer, to say I do understand the family's outrage over their son being shot so many times and killed. You see, I try to put myself in the role of a parent whose son was shot that many times by the police. I do realize there is no way that any of us can really know how that person feels unless it happens to us. But I can understand their agony at this time. Here is the way that Jayland Walker was described by friends and family. They said Walker had never broken a law a day in his life. No crimes of any kind. That's what Bobby DeCello, one of the attorneys, said. And Robert DeJernet, a relative of Walker's, and he was also a local pastor, he said that the 25-year-old was a fun-loving young man, full of jokes, who was adored by everyone. The pastor went on to say, "We are God-fearing folk who believe in God, and we want to exemplify that even in this process." That's what DeJernet told CNN. "We don't want any rioting or anything like that." He said, "Personally, I want to scream out and be mad." That's what the pastor said, but what is that going to do? So I can understand how all those looking in on this scene can all wonder why police fired so many times at this man. Regardless if they thought he was armed or not, why shooting 90 times? Shooting 90 times? Well, it seems to many to be way too much. I can understand that. Now, the officers that are involved in the shooting, they've all been placed on department leave, and a full investigation is and continues to be conducted by outside agencies. You get that? Outside agencies. They're not investigating their own shooting. And just as I understand the outrage of others, I want to ask you to also understand the real facts involved in this tragic incident. There are two questions particularly that I want to address. Number one, first, did police officers do anything illegal in shooting 90 times? Next, did they violate department policy? Now, in order to answer those questions, we're going to have to look at all the facts and try to move beyond our understandable emotions. But before we do that, it is now time for what we call here at Charlie Crime Buster our Crazy Crook Story of the Week. You see, we most often share a crazy crook story. Kind of lightens the load, since a lot of our crime involves some very heavy, dark emotions. Now, our crazy crook stories, well, they've always detailed some crazy ways that crooks have tried to flee from the police, including last week's. That's where a crazy crook tried to flee the police from charges, and he tried to flee from a police that turned a light sentence into a heavy one. And we've also shared stories where they've tried to outrun the police, even on a riding lawnmower, even attempting to flee the police. Now get this, on a motorized suitcase. You can see that, or hear that, in some of our past podcasts. And we have a whole lot of DUI stories. DUIs from lawnmowers. DUIs even from golf carts. And this one, my friend, well, this DUI may get the prize as the craziest ever. You see, we never really seem to run out of crazy crook stories from here, locally. Can you say Florida man? So here we go. This happened in Melbourne, Florida. A 39-year-old man was arrested on allegations, get this, hold on to your seat, from driving a motorized scooter, a shopping scooter, while drunk, and crashing into shelves Sunday at a Walmart in Melbourne. Yep, that's right. You know those little motorized scooters you see shoppers moving about on there in Walmart and other places? Well, yep, it happened. It happened inside a Walmart. According to Melbourne police, the man was driving a Walmart scooter He had his open backpack sitting in the scooter basket, and there was an open bottle of vodka could be seen. Now, police said the man was seen swaying in the scooter and running into shelves. He nearly struck other customers. Police said the man had glassy eyes and reeked of alcohol. Now, that scooter driver, he was unresponsive when he was asked to show his ID. They actually had to take him to the patrol car on a stretcher. And the man, well, he refused a breath test, big surprise, when he was taken into custody, according to police. Now, that man, he was booked in the Brevard County Jail. Get this, charges of DUI, driving under the influence, refusal with prior citation, disorderly intoxication, possession of open containers. So my friend, be careful. Be careful the next time you go to a Walmart, and watch out. Watch out for drunk driving shopper scooters. In fact, it may be best not only to not drive drunk, but don't shop drunk. I guess that one would be a DUI that would be turned into an SUI, shopping under the influence. Well, there it is, my friend. Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook story of the week. Now back to our main focus. Jayland Walker was shot and killed by police. He was, according to police, people who've been talking, wounded over 60 times. So let's start looking at some of the facts of this case. It was not true that Jayland Walker never broke a law in his life prior to the June 27th incident. In fact, my friend, just the night before, he again failed to stop for police. That same vehicle caught the attention of a New Franklin police officer who tried to stop the vehicle for having a broken taillight and license plate bulb as it left a Subway sandwich shop around 2:30 a.m. on Sunday. Now, the report went on to say at approximately 2:30 a.m. on June the 26th, a New Franklin police officer attempted to pull over a vehicle owned by Walker because the car had a broken taillight, missing license plate bulb. The driver failed to stop, drove at speeds approaching 50 miles per hour on city streets. That was before crossing the Akron city line. And at that point, this pursuing officer ended the less than 3-minute chase. Now, that information was actually confirmed by Jayland's family, stating they thought he should have been able to come home just like he did the night before when he failed to stop for police there. So they're asking, if the police called off pursuit that night, why not just call off the pursuit on the next night? Good question. First, let me say, my friend, the responding police on the first night, they called off the pursuit because they were coming into another jurisdiction, and it was just a pursuit over a traffic violation. But the next night, my friend, that pursuit was very much different than the previous one. First of all, officers knew that this was the second time a vehicle was seen in a high-crime area, and it is again failing to stop for police. But more importantly, remember that other pursuit lasted 3 minutes? Well, just after 40 seconds into this pursuit, something very differently happens. The suspect shoots at police. That's right. The suspect is using deadly force at police. Now, my friend, there is both a threat to the police and, get this, a threat to the public. You see, police have a responsibility to protect the public from someone who is unlawfully using deadly force. Try asking yourself this question. What if the police knew someone was armed and shooting, and they just let that person go? And that same person went down the street, walked into a convenience store and robbed it, shot your son who was working there as a part-time worker while going to college. How would you then feel about the police who had him in sight and just let him go? My friend, policy and public safety says you can't just let this pass. This pursuit is lawful. You are in pursuit of an armed individual who has attempted to shoot a police officer. If you would attempt to kill a police officer, what makes you think that he or she would not hesitate to kill others? Next, as you follow the pursuit, you hear some very important interactions from police dispatch. They are constantly reporting the speed of the chase and the traffic or lack of traffic as the pursuit continues. You see, this is to verify that the pursuit is not reaching the point where a lot of the public's in danger of the pursuit. It would be different if this was the height of rush hour or during the time that young people would be in danger, such as a time when school has been let out or other instances where a large amount of people may be about. This pursuit, my friend, is in an acceptable zone of continuing to get this man, who is deemed dangerous to the public. You see, the moment that Jayland shot at police, this incident went to a much, much higher level. And by the way, camera surveillance confirms that he did indeed shoot at police. Now keep in mind, my friend, this is happening in real time and real fast. The vehicle is then seen slowing down, and the suspect is then seen fleeing from the vehicle. Now the suspect is seen with a ski mask on. Get this. This isn't a face mask that you see in COVID. It's not a protection mask that we often see during the COVID pandemic. This is a ski mask. One like I just saw not too long ago in a commercial about some sort of an alarm to protect your home, and it showed this allegedly criminal in a ski mask. And so he has a ski mask on in the middle of summer. One like people use when they rob people at gunpoint. Now you now know two things. One, this person is dangerous. He has access to a weapon. He is not responding to verbal commands. They even use the use of a non-lethal weapon. They use a taser, and the taser is not working. You now know that as a police officer, your own life and the life of your fellow officers are in danger. Now remember, time is moving quickly, and you are responding according to your training. He stops, turns toward you, reaches to his waistband, gets into what was reported a shooting stance. Well, what do? You do what you're trained to do. 8 of those officers see a threat to their own lives, and 8 of those fire their weapons. Now, investigation now in the middle of July, it reveals that after the medical examination, actually that 8 of the police officers hit the suspect 48 times, not 60 wounds as earlier reported. 8 officers hitting the suspect 8 times. You see, that means if you divide that equally, that would be 6 shots an officer. Were more shots fired? Yes, there was. You see, it's not like the movies where you shoot one time and the suspect falls to the ground. In a high-stress police-involved shooting, well, the law of average says that only about 30 to 35% of your shots are accurate. And my friend, you do not shoot to wound, as you see on TV. You shoot to stop the threat. Also, keep in mind, it is a high-stress shooting. It means you're shooting as your life and the lives of those around you depend upon you stopping the threat. Yet, I understand you're still asking, why so many shots? I do want to answer that in a moment, but right now it's time for what we call our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. And this one is Ronald Romo Jr. You see, performing a double act of heroism, that's right, a double act, Romo actually saved a father and his young son from a burning vehicle that was in Shrewsbury, Missouri, back during a month of April. You see, driving by the scene of a crash, 30-year-old Romo, he pulled a trapped man through the flames. Those in flames was engulfing his sport utility vehicle. And as he led the father to safety, Romo, he then learned that a man's son was still inside the vehicle. And get this, Romo returned to a burning car. He freed the child from the car seat. Trent and the young boy by the name of Leo, they were both rescued by Romo in the nick of time. That was just before a deadly fireball consumed the entire vehicle. You see, here is a man who saw someone from danger. He did not just drive on by like so many others. Too many do not want to get involved. Had Romo felt that way, well, a father and a son would not be alive today. And that is why Robert Romo, he is now our Charlie Crime Busters Courageous Citizen of the Week. Well, now back to our main focus. We now know that Jayland Walker was not carrying a weapon when he was shot. You see, that weapon was left on the seat with another loaded magazine. And interesting enough, left on the seat was what appeared to be a wedding ring on the seat. You see, that's led some to think that this might just have been suicide by cop. Now that, unfortunately, we will never really know for sure. However, one thing we do know. It is reasonable for us to believe that officers had a reason to believe that he was armed. He had already shot at him. He had a ski mask on. He appeared to reach for a weapon. He did not have his hands up and surrender. He did not listen to verbal commands, and he appeared to be reaching for a weapon. So officers, figuring their own safety, they shot. But why so many shots, you may be asking? You see, my friend, the shooting itself, it always lasts only seconds, about 8 this time. But questions about whether the number of shots the officer fired was warranted, or whether a suspect posed a deadly threat to an officer in the first place, well, those questions, they can persist long after that suspect is wounded or killed. You see, law enforcement departments have a long time fielded questions about why officers fire as many shots as they do at a suspect. You see, police shootings, well, they aren't a science. They're usually high-stress situations where adrenaline takes over an officer's response to survive. But there are factors that explain why officers shoot as many times as they do. You see, my friend, police shoot until they've terminated a threat. That is, according to Seth Stallton, he's an associate professor at the University of the South Carolina School of Law who studies policing. He says the textbook answer is that they are to fire until they've terminated a threat. And he goes on to say that, please remember that in high-stress situations, you always fall back to your training. Our expert then goes on to say that if officers are using deadly force, they are trained to not pause their fire, but to shoot in quick succession. Why? My friend, by taking a break to pause your fire to assess the suspect, well, that could give that suspect time to harm them and others. Now, keep in mind that this shooting lasted only around 7 or 8 seconds. And legally, the number of shots an officer fire, well, it doesn't matter. Because under the Fourth Amendment, officers must have had reason to believe that the suspect they fired on was a threat who could have killed them or caused great bodily harm. The court determines whether the officer was reasonable in making that assessment, not whether the number of shots fired was reasonable. You see, the high shot, well, it may be attributed to a phenomenon known as reflexive fire. You see, reflexive fire, that occurs when one officer fires on a suspect, and in the confusion of more than one person firing, then you don't know if the shots fired are coming from those around you or from the subject you perceive as a threat. Also, when you're in a high-stress shooting incident, my friend, you do not have time to mentally count your shots. Many officers, well, they can't remember correctly how many shots they fired, because some of them that were interviewed immediately after a high-stress shooting, well, listen to our expert as he explains the following. He says, quote, "Some officers will testify or give a statement immediately after that they fired 3 to 4 shots when they actually fired 10 to 11 shots. Stallton says, in high-stress, adrenaline, heart-pounding moments, an officer is not counting their shots. An officer who perceives that they're in immediate danger may just keep pulling the trigger until their brain catches up with them." Also, keep in mind, Police officers are given quick-firing weapons to help them protect themselves. And, my friend, the type of firearm an officer uses, well, that may impact the number of shots they fire. If they're using the typical semi-automatic weapon, well, Alexander says they may have as many as 15 rounds in their gun that they can fire in quick succession. So now, my friend, you may be thinking, well, why issue that type of gun? Well, the answer to that's pretty simple. To issue any other type would leave them vulnerable to the bad guys. For instance, Jayland Walker, he had the same type of weapon. He could have fired multiple shots, just like the officers fired that night. So here you have, get this now, 8 officers. And I have been, as a law enforcement officer myself, I have been in stress situations like this. And I can tell you, your brain does 2 things. Number 1, you see everything clearly, but you often see it in a tunnel. Just you and that you're focused upon. And each officer could see for themselves a man that they believed to be armed, reaching for what they reasonably thought was a weapon, which that person would use to shoot you directly. And so, you respond exactly as you are trained. You use deadly force. And if each of you hit the suspect divided equally, if you each shot him 6 times. Now think about that. 6 times they hit. Now no one would think that if only one officer shot and hit a person they thought was using deadly force, and they were using a semi-automatic firearm, that they hit him 6 times, they would not think that that in itself would have been excessive. But the difference here is that there was a total of 13 cops. 8 of them saw it as a direct threat to each of them, and they responded as trained. See, had they been just by themselves, one person, I don't think we would have the extent of reaction we have today. But you see, the sad part is that this should not have happened. That's right, it should not have happened. Had Jayland Walker stopped, as he should have when police who had probable cause for a traffic stop, had he stopped, had he complied, this would not have happened. Had he not used deadly force himself to shoot at the police, this would not have happened. Had he complied after he finally stopped, this would not have happened. Had he not gotten out of the vehicle with a ski mask and not respond to verbal commands, had he not done that, this would not have happened. Had he surrendered instead of reaching into his waistband, this would not have happened. The real question is why? Why did he not comply? Now, it has been reported that he was upset over the loss of a girlfriend. Could this really have been suicide by a cop? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? And though I do understand the outcry of others, well, I do not wonder about the answer to the earlier questions. My answer is, it was not an illegal shooting. The officers had all the reason to believe that their lives were in danger, and they had a legal right to use deadly force. It is my opinion that each officer feared for his life that day and responded accordingly. Actually, the sheer volume of the officers on the scene that night, well, it should have led Walker to comply. That's why we often want a large response. You see, most people do not resist a large police presence. In fact, a large police presence keeps a lot of people from resisting. And that, my friend, decreases the danger level for themselves and others. Next, I do believe the pursuit and the response was not in violation of police policy. They were careful to monitor the pursuit in a way that kept the public safe. They had reason to believe that each of these officers were in danger. They had a right to defend themselves, all of them. In fact, my friend, when it gets down to it, it is an unfortunate, unavoidable incident on the part of police. Lessons to learn? Yep, they are. Number 1, laws are here for us to obey. They're here to protect us. It is against the law to not comply to police. If you feel you're pulled over unfairly, you have a right to fight that in court. Next, if you use deadly force at police, you can expect police to protect themselves and others with deadly force. And then thirdly, our decisions do matter. Jayland Walker may have been a good man in many, many ways. I will take the word of family and friends on that matter. However, he made a very, very poor judgment decision. That poor judgment was in disobeying the laws on 2 separate nights. He made a poor judgment, very poor, using deadly force against the police. He made a poor judgment to get out of that vehicle with a ski mask on and run. He made a poor judgment to then turn toward the police, not with his hands up, but to reach to his waistband. His poor judgment is the real reason for his death. My friend, we need to all remember that in moments of our life when we have to use judgment ourselves. Your decisions do indeed matter. So this is Charlie Crimebuster saying until this time next time, be safe, be alert, make smart choices. For the life you save, well, it may be your very own.